Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily update for February 12th, 2021. Today is a very special day, and I'll tell you why in a moment, but because it's a special day, I'm going to do something a little different. Instead of doing the usual Friday questions, I'm going to talk about the life and work of Lyndon LaRouche, who passed away 2 years ago today in 2019. Now, today, to honor Mr. LaRouche, on the LaRouche organization website, we will be having a full 24 hours of videos of speeches and presentations and discussions he had during his lifetime. Now, why are we doing this? Well, there's an absolutely crucial reason for it. We're at a moment in world history where we have to decide whether we're going to continue down a path toward globalization, toward central bankers' dictatorship, toward geopolitical confrontation and war, and neoliberal austerity and speculative economy, or are we going to reject all of that and move out of that whole paradigm into a new era of economic development and peaceful cooperation? Lyndon LaRouche devoted his entire life toward the latter. How can we pull together alliances of sovereign nation states which will fight for the good of all of mankind, where patriots of nations will assert their sovereignty over their government, over their needs to be fulfilled by representative government, but at the same time will act with other nations for the good of the other. That's not only the Christian principle, but that's also the principle of statecraft of the founding fathers of the United States. And one of Lyndon LaRouche's most important contributions was his revival on a higher level of the ideas of the American system of economics. He insisted in his writings that we are continuing the fight between a republic and an empire that was not finished in 1776 or 1783 or 1812 or 1865. That up until the present day, there's still a battle on this earth between the forces of an empire. The City of London, which has completely co-opted Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Washington, D.C. into their empire, versus a potential to revive the American system and spread it throughout the world. Now, given that so many people in the last 4 years have come to realize that there are evil people out there, evil people with power, with control over media, with control over education, with control over the flows of money and who gets what, given that so many people are aware of that, it's time that that awareness is taken to a higher level. And that's what Lyndon LaRouche did in his life's work. Now, we have this absurd event underway right now, the second impeachment of Donald Trump, which is the culmination of a 4+ year effort by this establishment, which includes the British monarchy, it includes the City of London, British intelligence, the so-called Five Eyes, which includes the United States intelligence community under Bush and Obama, which used the 9/11 as a Reichstag fire to carry out a surveillance state in the United States, to the point that we today see the big tech companies, the social media companies, carrying out Soviet-style censorship. Now, before there was this attack on Donald Trump, there was an attack on Lyndon LaRouche. And it's for exactly the same reason by exactly the same people. Lyndon LaRouche, in the late 70s, in his opposition to the presidency of Jimmy Carter, who was a trilateral commission puppet, controlled by the Rockefellers, by Wall Street, coordinated through people such as Zbigniew Brzezinski, what he adopted, what LaRouche did, was develop a conception of how to break out of what was then the zero growth policy, which was in the Carter administration called the Policy for the Controlled Disintegration of the U.S. Economy. And this had actually started in 1971 with Nixon's capitulation to people like George Shultz and others to go along with a break in the Bretton Woods system and severing the relationship of the dollar and gold and creating a floating exchange rate system, which LaRouche warned at that time if this continued, we would be on a path towards Schachtian policy, Schacht having been the finance minister of Hitler, who was the real author of the death camp policies, which started as slave labor camps on behalf of the trusts and cartels of Wall Street, London, and Germany. And Schacht was brought in by global financiers, mostly out of London and New York, to carry out a policy of British geopolitics, to pit Germany against Russia, Germany against France, and to bring the United States in on the side of Britain to perpetuate the British Empire. Now, LaRouche came of age during World War II, serving in the China-Burma-India theater. And he was in India when Gandhi was leading the revolution to throw the British out. And he learned from that something about not only the British, but how to counter a British imperial policy. But it was in the late 70s when he was going head-to-head against the Brzezinski geopolitical strategy and the controlled disintegration, the neoliberal policy, the free trade, the outsourcing, and so on, deregulation of banking, that LaRouche came to the attention of Ronald Reagan and was brought in by Ronald Reagan to negotiate with the Soviet Union on something which became known as the Strategic Defense Initiative. Now, LaRouche became known to Reagan because one of the things LaRouche did was run for president. He had 8 presidential campaigns. And while he never got a lot of votes, at least official votes, he suffered from some of the same things we saw in this last election, namely theft of votes. But Reagan saw LaRouche, was impressed with his ideas, and brought him in to negotiate with the Soviets for joint deployment of a strategic defense initiative, an anti-missile defense system. The Soviets rejected this, but it put a fear in the hearts of the geopoliticians who were trying to keep Reagan under control that they launched a Get LaRouche task force, which included the FBI. It included elements of the CIA. It definitely included British intelligence. And the person who became the lead prosecutor in the Boston case, legal case against LaRouche, was none other than Robert Mueller, the same Mueller of the Mueller special counsel against Donald Trump. Now, the reason it's important to know this is that it was LaRouche's ideas, not his personal power, not his money, not his status, but his ideas that caused them to identify him as an enemy. And before there was cancel culture, there was an attempt to cancel Lyndon LaRouche. Before there was mass censorship of the sort we're seeing today from the social media and the mainstream media, there was censorship against LaRouche. As a Washington Post editorial stated, we must never talk about Lyndon LaRouche except to attack him as a right-wing neo-Nazi communist disruptor. Never cover him. Despite this, LaRouche's 8 campaigns for president put forward a number of ideas that are at the center of the fight today. The need for the government to regulate banking. Why? Because if you put it in the hands of private bankers, they'll run speculative schemes, Ponzi schemes, to make fortunes. And unfortunately, since 1971, that's what's dominated economic policy. Secondly, the idea of what is man, that this should be a central issue in political debate. Are we potentially just animals, beasts of burden who could be used as slaves, who can be manipulated to accept our submission to these oligarchs? Or does man possess a creative spark given to him by the Creator, which enables us to make new discoveries, to transform history, to transform the way we live, and that those scientific discoveries, when implemented through technological advances, give us an increased power over nature to increase the numbers of people who can be sustained per square kilometer of land. His concept of potential relative potential density. his concept of energy flux density as another aspect of this science, which basically said the ability to increase the power of our source of energy enables man to, again, increase the potential relative population density. These are just some of the ideas that he introduced. But most important, I think, for us today was his conception of knowing the enemy, and knowing the enemy from the standpoint of who is really running global operations, who has the power to run things like Russiagate, or to disrupt an election process so the doubt is cast as to whether the votes were honestly collected and counted. Who has the power to manipulate the media? Who has the power to cancel people and to slander people and to spy on everyone? At this point in time, it's obvious. It's this extended British Empire, which includes many of the so-called elites in this country in both parties, the political leaders of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, who are running this spectacle of mass polarization, dividing the population into competing camps, neither party has a vision for the future. And so I would encourage you today to join us in commemorating the extraordinary life of Lyndon LaRouche by going to the LaRouche Organization website and participating in the 24-hour LaRouche Marathon. Watch the videos, think about them, and then get in touch with us. Join the LaRouche Organization. We'll have the link on our website where you can sign in and join. But this is the determining factor of the future, which way we'll go in the future. Will you commit yourself to a fight to restore a constitutional republic for the United States, which can then collaborate with other sovereign nations globally? Or will you submit to the tyranny of the oligarchy? And by submission, there are many people who are fighting, but they're fighting inside the bubble, inside the controlled environment, because they don't fully understand this battle of an empire versus a republic. So I'd encourage you to join us today, study these videos, then you can purchase books. We're putting out the complete works of Lyndon LaRouche on our website. You'll be able to purchase these, study them at your leisure. But this is what we must do today. February 12th, the commemoration of the death 2 years ago of Lyndon LaRouche. So thank you for joining me. I don't mean this to be a somber subject, but actually one of joy, because LaRouche's whole commitment was to help people discover the meaning of their own life, and the fact that as a creative individual, endowed by the Creator with those creative powers to change the course of mankind, that's something to celebrate. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again next week.